Welcome back to our first section, the first lecture. This lecture will cover chapter 1 and chapter 2. I've kind of combined them. They both talk about the ideas and the spirit of American politics. So I thought we could do them together in one, but please read both chapters as well as complete this lecture. There will be 2 discussion questions posted for this week pertaining to this lecture, so please pay attention. So today we'll talk about the 7 key American ideas that are discussed in your book in more detail. And we'll also talk about the arguments that surround each of them, as well as how first of all, what politics is, and how American politics works, and what does government do. We'll close the chapter, as almost all the chapters do, discussing who we are as a people. So we'll just touch on that a little bit on one of the demographics of age. All right, so let's begin. I don't make you memorize or read through fully too many of our documents, but there are 3 documents that we will discuss. One is the Declaration of Independence, also the Articles of Confederation, and then, of course, our Constitution. All 3 of those, plus the Federalist Papers you can find in the back of your book. It is the Declaration of Independence, only 2 pages long. The first half is a little more exciting than the second half, but please feel free to read that. We were founded on a nation of ideas that were set forth in our Declaration of Independence, especially by these first beautiful words that were written. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So our Declaration of Independence were the Founding Fathers' way to explain what they believed they wanted the role of government to be, and that was to secure each individual's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they felt that people would form their own governments, and the government's job would be to secure these rights. So the Declaration of Independence, the second half is a list of grievances that they had towards the king and towards England at the time. But the first half is setting out their ideas for their new nation. Now, I'd like to talk about this next definition, American exceptionalism. It will come up again, and this is in bold, so that would be a key that says that you will be asked a question or 2 on the exam about this. American exceptionalism, when you first hear the word, it appears to have the feeling that maybe Americans think they're exceptional, but it is really based on these ideas we just talked about, that every individual has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And all of these 7 ideals that we are going to talk about now, some of them are listed here: equality, self-rule, and limited government, as well as the American dream, the freedom of religion. These ideas that the Founding Fathers thought were so important are written within the Declaration of Independence. And so at the time that America was being formed, it was very unique to have a government categorize these ideas as important. So the definition for American exceptionalism is the view that the United States is or was uniquely characterized by these distinct set of ideas, as opposed to being ruled by a monarchy or a king or a dictator. So let's just jump right into these 7 ideas that are outlined in your book: liberty, self-rule, limited government, individualism, the American dream, equality, and religion. They were the foundation of American politics and what has made America very distinctive, and that most Americans agree on the meaning of these ideas. The first one being liberty, which is often interchanged with the word freedom, but for our course, we're going to use liberty. These This idea comes up more often in American history. You see it in the national anthem, um, and it says it in the Declaration of Independence. This is the idea that all of us have the ability to pursue our own desires without interference from others, within limits. Of course, we can't break laws, we can't kill people and do whatever we want, but in order to pursue our own uh, dreams and our own goals, we have the right to do that without having interference with government or others. And so that puts liberty into two, you can look at it from two different aspects. Negative liberty, which means we have the freedom from constraints or interference from others or for the government. So nobody can tell us we can't practice a certain religion or that we can't have certain ideas about that we want to speak out. We have the freedom of speech, so nobody can restrict us from that. And then the flip side of it is positive liberty, which we have the freedom to pursue our own goals, um, and the government will protect us, whether it's through policies to try to make things equal, or whether it's through bringing a court case when people are not being treated equal. The second ideal is self-rule, and we'll talk a little bit about the makeup of our government again in the next couple of chapters, but originally we were based on the idea of our government being a democracy. Um, a full 100% democracy would mean that the citizens would make all the decisions, citizens' participation in making the decisions of government. In the early days, many citizens did come together for town hall meetings and vote on everything. That is not the way our ability to make decisions on the federal level is set up now. We actually vote through our representatives. But we do have some lingering tools of direct democracy where we are actually able to make decisions in the forms of referendums and initiatives. Specifically to Nevada, we still have referendums and initiatives. So we'll talk about this again when we get to Nevada, but a referendum is where citizens can vote directly on an issue or a law that has been, they can say yes or no if they like the law. We don't have that on the federal level, but Nevada does. An initiative is when maybe a citizen wants to propose a law, like let's legalize marijuana and this is how we're going to do it. And you put that on the ballot, or an amendment to the Constitution, like let's change the monopoly of the energy company that's in Nevada. We had that voted on 2 times. Once the public was in favor, and by the second election last year, the public, or 2 years ago, the public was against it. So these are ways that we can continue self-rule. But on the federal level, we don't have these first two. Sunshine laws, however, are any kind of laws that are made to permit the public to watch their policymakers, whether it's you're watching Congress discuss things on C-SPAN, or if you're able to look things up online and see what the wording and the policies are that they're considering to pass. These kind of abilities are considered to be sunshine laws. So that gives people more ability to participate in their government. You can look at this map and see that depending on the state, some states do have, like Nevada has initiatives and referendums. Most of the states in the West do. And then a couple states just have initiatives for constitutional amendments. A few have referendums only, and the larger portion on the east end of the nation doesn't have either one. So let me just go back right here. So we talked about we are a democracy, but we are also considered a republic. And The difference between the two is very subtle. Republic is a government in which citizens rule indirectly through their elected officials. The decisions are made through their elected representatives, and that the government institutions protect individual rights to protect them from the tyranny of the majority. So this is built in by giving people individual rights. It's a protection of the minority. And I don't mean minority as in racial minority, but as in the 49%. So if we were a pure democracy and everything was made by majority rules, then 51% of the people who were voting could make a decision that would hinder the rights of 49%. But our protection in that are in our Bill of Rights. So we'll get to that in a little bit, and maybe it'll make it a little more sense then. But the United States contains both elements of democracy and a republic, so we're kind of a mixed system. So we often call ourselves a democratic republic. Gives us opportunities for direct participation, but the government is organized to check the majority by securing our rights. The third American ideal is limited government. So when the Founding Fathers were putting together the Constitution, as well as the Articles of Confederation, but mostly the Constitution, they were concerned about centralized leadership. They distrusted the power of a monarchy, a sole figure who was making all the decisions, and so they wanted to put some restrictions in place that would keep from this happening again, from being ruled by one person or someone having too much power. So their image at the time of a central government was that this government over in England was remote. They had no idea how they felt. They were untrustworthy. They threatened their freedoms. And the Americans at the time were enjoying their own rights to vote on the issues that were in their colonies. And so they didn't have a very good idea, a very good impression of what a central government could do for them. So they felt that it would put a threat on their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So they built into the Constitution these suspicions of government. And so therefore the Constitution has the system of checks and balances and separate powers. There's 3 branches of government, and there are 3 co-equal branches of government. So if one branch becomes too powerful, the other branch has a check on that power. And these were parts of the limited government that the Founding Fathers put into our Constitution. The next idea is individualism, and this is an idea of community versus individualism. So Americans generally all value individualism. We all like to think that we can do whatever we want, and we can take care of ourselves. So this idea that individuals and not society or the community or the government are responsible for our own well-being. Many of us do believe this, that we're responsible for our own well-being, and or we're responsible for ourselves and our families. People work really hard to get ahead, and we feel we should be able to pursue the fruits of our hard work. This puts strong emphasis on negative liberty, meaning that there's a constraint. Nobody can stop us from doing this. These are our rights. We can pursue our dreams as much as we put our effort into it. The kind of contrasting idea of individual would be social democracy, not to be confused with socialism, but social democracy where there are several countries that have a social democracy: England, Japan, Germany, a lot of Scandinavian countries. And this is where the government policies ensure that all are comfortably cared for, within the context of a capitalist economy. It emphasizes community and that people are responsible for one another. Um, and it's based on solidarity. The idea that if everybody is healthy and has a good education, then it kind of raises all boats and everyone as well. But that the government and all of us have a responsibility towards helping other people. So this is more strong emphasis on positive liberty, where all people are guaranteed the same opportunity. So if you look at public opinion polls, from different countries, they ask the question: should people should take more responsibility to provide for themselves? So, in other words, more towards individualism. And if you can see that Americans score pretty high on this, we believe that we should take our responsibility for ourselves. And as you look at the other countries, they may be more inclined to take the more social democracy view, where we're responsible for others as well. The next idea is the American dream. This was first discussed by Benjamin Franklin when he summarized it, that the American dream is: if you are talented and work hard, you can achieve financial success. So that means you have to be able to have some kind of talent and some kind of ambitious, and then you can achieve financial success. And then James Truslow Adams, another historian, also said that the American dream is a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement. So, same thing as individualism, where you have the responsibility to work hard, but you shouldn't be hindered uh, because of who you are, or where you were born, or what your race is, or what your gender is. And then President Bill Clinton also added that the American dream that we were all raised on is a simple but powerful one. If you work hard and play by the rules, you should be given a chance to go as far as your God-given abilities will take you. Now, if you read this part of the chapter about the American dream, you can go into detail of how we look at the American dream now, and how um, the younger generation feels about this, because in the beginning of the country, there was a lot of opportunity for most people. Let's say mostly um, landowners and male and white people. But as time grew on and we fought through various challenges, we're now seeing that maybe the American dream, if it really is all about financial success, that maybe it might be tilted more towards the wealthy. And so your book asks a lot of questions. Has the American dream grown too biased towards the rich and the powerful? Is there a big gap between the rich and middle income earners and the poor? Or the other question is, does the American dream promote the wrong values? Like, is it really all about economic, financial success at the cost of damaging our environment or harming our old fashioned ideals in the pursuit of our economic success? There's the results of some polls that are taken. It says that nearly half of 18 to 29-year-olds said the American dream did not apply to their generation. When I have face-to-face classes, we usually talk about what people think the American dream is. A lot of students say being able to own a home, um, make money, have a successful career. When we go a little deeper, we talk about values like being able to have good health care for children, offer them education. So, how far this dream has become attainable or unattainable to the younger generation is a question we'll all be looking at in coming years. I've I often include videos that kind of have to do with whatever our topics are. This one, I won't play it for you on the video, but please take a look. This is a satirist or comedian, Hassan Minhaj, talking about his family coming to America and the American dream. It's very interesting. It kind of covers all the ideas that we just talked about, the 7 ideas. Actually, there's one more, sorry. The two more. Equality will be our next idea, American idea. That this is that every citizen enjoys the same privileges, status, and rights before the laws. Um, there's no doubt that in the beginning of with the founding fathers, this equality was not the case. It was an ideal to strive for, but we know that a lot of the founding fathers had slaves. We know that women did not have social equality or political equality or even economic equality, as well as people of color, Native Americans. So this has been an ongoing uh, goal to achieve. And when we talk about civil rights and civil liberties, we'll discuss whether we feel that that we're constantly moving forward and getting better, or if we're actually sometimes taking 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. But your book talks about 3 different types of equality: social equality, which means that everybody has the same status. I believe it's safe to say that America does not have fixed social classes, that anyone can raise up in they can go to school, they can become a doctor if they'd like, be a lawyer, be a president. Um, Political equality is the idea that one vote, one person, one vote. All citizens have the same political rights and opportunity. Doesn't matter uh, who you are, as long as you're a citizen of the United States, you can vote. Um, and also, depending on the state, if you're incarcerated, which we'll talk about that later. So that was the goal. It wasn't set up immediately like that. We had to have 4 different amendments to the Constitution to broaden the ability for people to have the right to vote. One being color, one being citizenship, one being gender, and the last one, most recent amendment, was age, bringing it down to 18 years of age. And then economic equality, and that, like we said, depends on is based on hopefully equal opportunity for everyone, but also individualism, how far someone wants to go. When you look at economic equality, if we look at this chart first, this is based from 1950s to the 1980s, and we saw that there was a lot of growth in the bottom 20%, meaning the poor of the nation. The middle class raised a good deal over those 30 years. The top 20% also got richer, and so did the top 5%. So this is a seemingly somewhat equal growing, maybe not exactly equal, but it's nice to see that the bottom percentage is growing at a good rate. Then if you look at the following 30 years, we see that the rate of economic growth amongst the lower middle class and above the middle class is kind of stagnated compared to the top 1%. So this leads to a disparity between wealth. Your book talks about the difference between equal opportunity and equal outcome. So equal opportunity is giving everyone the same opportunity to achieve the American dream. Equal outcome might mean more government injection into policies that help people get an equal outcome. Sometimes this may seem unfair to the people who aren't receiving the help. So most Americans are in agreement that equal opportunity is a good thing. Not everyone agrees that equal outcome is something that the government should have a hand in. But the United States has gone from being the most equal society in the world to less equal than other wealthy nations. And the last idea that was on the minds of the founding fathers was the idea of religion. Our First Amendment declares that Congress shall make no law respecting an established religion. However, also Congress shall not prohibit the free exercise of religion. Thomas Jefferson was a strong proponent that there should be a wall of separation between church and state, but as we know, there are many things in our culture that bring religion into the practices of Congress, the statues or decorations of our government buildings, the Pledge of Allegiance, we have In God I Trust on our money. So we do have religion as part of our culture, but in the First Amendment, Congress is prohibited from making any law establishing a national religion. Yes, so you can go ahead and read on there. If we look at other nations and how important people feel religion is in their lives, the U.S. is pretty high up there. Iran has almost 80% of the people believe that religion is very important in their lives, and the U.S. is over 50%. Mexico behind that. So this is just kind of a good indicator of how, even though we don't have religion as a national, we don't Congress cannot make any laws to establish a religion. We still, as a nation, have a large percentage of people that feel that religion is very important in their lives. This chart I find is interesting. These are projections, so I believe they go from 2010 to 2050, the projection of percentages of types of religion. So, of course, the largest religion or classification of religion in the United States are Christians. That includes many different religions, Catholics, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses. And then you have the next largest is unaffiliated. And so I always like to ask my class what they think might cause this increase in unaffiliated and a decrease, in a sense, going into the future of Christians. And usually there's always discussion about, I have some students immediately say, well, there's a lot of people that believe in science now, or maybe our grandparents' generation never questioned religion and they passed it on to our parents' generation. And now this generation is questioning more and making different decisions. Some people say we have more access to information, so we're allowed to check out different religions or different ways of belief. And many people say they don't need to actually belong to a religion or go to a church to have moral values. There's no right or wrong answer, but an interesting projection of where we're going as far as percentage. But we're still quite a very largely populated Christian nation. Yes. Okay, so on that portion, which I believe came mostly from chapter 1, I've given you a crash course here. Let's see, which one is it? I believe it's this one. You can watch this crash course history. These guys on the crash course are funny. They speak really fast. I like to add them into my lectures because they are, they kind of take everything I just said, put it all together fast just to kind of reinforce it. So I highly recommend you listen through the crash courses, even if the guys kind of drive you crazy. All right. Okay, moving on to the second chapter. First, I'd like to talk about the definition of politics. And Your book talks about the definition of politics being how a society makes its collective decisions. I like to make it simple and say deciding who gets what, where, when, and how. So please, this is also in bold. That means you will need to know what the definition of politics is for one of your exam questions. So basically, politics is the decision making of who gets the resources, who gets what policies, who gets what services. So we collect taxes in order to pay for the services that we give. And so this is the dilemma of how politics works in the United States. As we said before, we are a democracy. This is a form of government in which the people hold the power. So we elect people to make those decisions about who gets what, where, and what to do with the money that we collect, where to put our energy. Americans elect more than 500,000 public officials. We have a couple paradoxes. We have candidates who have won the presidential election that lost the popular vote. We, as you will see, we have very, very unpopular Congress that is continually reelected year after year. So we have the ability of a democracy to vote our representatives in, and yet we complain about them when they're in, but we reelect them the following year. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about Congress. And then we have some paradoxes that our judges are appointed for life. Is that really the best plan? The founding fathers seem to think so, but we're starting to see, we can see some challenges with that as well. There was a quote that was recently quoted in the news recently, and this was after they finished the Constitution. Benjamin Franklin apparently walked outside, and a woman asked him, "What kind of government have you given us, sir?" And his reply was, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." So basically, he's saying, well, we're going to do this, but whether we can stay a republic where people are, their rights are protected and they have a fair government that protects people's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is yet to be seen. It's an ambitious goal. It had never been done before. So we are still 200 and nearly 40 years later, we're still here. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so most Americans would prefer to have voluntary groups do take care of the services rather than government action. In other words, we don't want to pay taxes for services when we can get people to do it for free. However, we have a very, very large government. The U.S. operates a large government with over 1,300 federal agencies, 15 departments. These are all the bureaucracies, which will be doing, one of your assignments will be on bureaucracies. So these are all the organizations that you can choose from. 1,300 federal agencies, 15 departments, 2.2 million federal employees, 2.5 military, another 4.4 million state employees, 12.2 million local employees, 500,000 elected officials. So almost 22 million people work for some level of government in the United States. Very large. When you look at opinion polls, the United States we have a very low trust for our government. You can see peaks probably when Kennedy was assassinated. We have Bush. We've got a peak here after September. I'm sorry. First Bush was during one of the wars. Second Bush, September 11th. But progressively, we've kind of it's actually not the presidency; it's their government. So trust in government at the time of these presidents. As far as deciding who gets what, where, when, and where, let's look at the purpose of the Constitution. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the Constitution next. But the beginning of the Constitution says that we are to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. So that's the charge for government. This is what we expect government to do for us. And as far as promoting domestic tranquility and providing for common defense, that means we need to have some kind of security, whether it's military or National Guard or local defense. Those are ways we spend money. Promoting for general welfare is that everyone, so we don't have a nation full of sick people that can't afford to get any health care. We also have certain policies in place. Looking at the budget of how we spend our money, we will be talking about these 4 programs. These are the biggest expenditures that our government spends money on. That's Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid, and the military. More than 65% of the budget is on these 4 alone. We could get a better picture here. So 21% on national defense, 26 on Social Security, 14 on Medicare, and 14 on Medicaid, and then a good 7% on our net interest. So we will talk about why we spend so much money on these 4 and how we can get out of some of these, and why many politicians choose not to talk about these. I'll give you a hint. It's called re-election, but we'll talk about that more later. Okay, so this next slide, I'd like to hopefully give you some idea, because the definition of politics of deciding who gets what kind of services can be very divisive. And so I'd like to kind of think about this in an analogy of an elevator. So say you live in a building, it's 3 stories high. Some people live on the first floor, some people live on the second, some people live on the third. And the building gets together and they say, hey, let's put an elevator in, and that'll make it easier for the people going up to the second or the third floor. And we'd like everyone to pay for it equally. So the people on the first floor, they're like, well, I probably will never use the elevator. I don't need it. So I have very little use for it, and I don't want to contribute to it because it's not something I'm going to use. People on the second floor, they might say, yeah, well, I'll use the elevator every once in a while, but on days I feel good, I can take the stairs. So I don't want to pay a whole lot of money for it, but it would be nice to have it there. Now, the people on the third floor, they're like, absolutely, we need an elevator. So yes, I'm going to use it, and yes, I'm willing to contribute to the building and maintenance of this elevator. So if we can think of the elevator as any kind of policy, so environmental protection policy, how does it affect everyone? Does it affect people who live in more polluted areas more than people who live in less polluted areas? Roads. If you are willing to pay for your taxes to go towards roads, if you don't own a car and you stay at home or you work at home, you might not want to contribute to the maintenance and the building of roads. If you are a young couple who has decided not to have children, or you're a single person and you don't have children, you might not want your tax money to go to education. If you are well off and you feel that you worked your way up, you might not want to contribute to welfare. On the other hand, if you're not well off and you are in the category of receiving welfare, you might not even have enough money to contribute to too many taxes. And then the same thing with healthcare, same thing with public transit. So these are all collective actions. So things that, and services, services that the government provides have to be equal for everyone, or people, or the people that need it. And the problem is deciding how much you're willing to contribute through your taxes, and how much these services are distributed among people. Not everybody needs every service. We could probably say that everybody needs the ability to know that their food is safe, and that the air is clear, and that water is clean, um, and that we're protected by a national military that will protect us, or the CIA, or all of the security agencies that work to protect us. We can all say that we would appreciate that, but there might be some services that you do not participate in, or nobody you know participates in them or needs them, and therefore then you would feel that those should not be priorities of the government. So I hope that kind of clears the idea of, we'll talk more about policymaking in later chapters, but that's kind of the definition there of what the government does. So finally, when we talk about numbers, most people don't want our government to grow bigger. We want less taxes taken out of our paychecks. But the reality is that this, I think this is, this year's most recent. The federal budget is $4.1 trillion, 4.4 in 2019. More than 61% of that will go to those 4 programs that we discussed. The U.S. government will only receive 3.4 trillion in revenue, maybe, because I'm not quite sure if that includes all of the tax breaks from the last tax cut bill. So we will receive less in revenue than the Congress has passed on in their budget of spending. That creates a $985 billion deficit. That's the difference between the amount of money comes in each year and the amount of money that goes out. So this is a problem, and this deficit just keeps growing. So Americans dislike government in the abstract, but yet we do support many of the things that government does. We also dislike taxes, so we'd like to pay. We even though we pay lower taxes than other citizens from other advanced industrial nations, we still feel like we're paying too much tax. But we like the federal programs. We just don't want to pay for them, if that makes sense. So if we look at the other countries, how we compare as far as our tax rate, a lot of other European and Scandinavian countries pay much higher tax rates. And of course, this is because they have much more social services like education, healthcare, and other benefits to their society, under the idea of social democracy, as opposed to individualism that we discussed earlier. So U.S. taxpayers have less of a tax burden than other countries, but yet we still feel like it's too much. So this is kind of interesting. There was a recent poll that found that 55% of Americans report receiving government benefits. However, the number is closer to 96%. So that means many people do not even know that they're receiving government programs. So this chart showed that 55% said yes, they receive some form of mostly Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, unemployment benefits, or food stamps. The remaining 45% said they didn't receive anything. However, 27% were on public housing beneficiaries, 43% received unemployment insurance, 44% were receiving Social Security, and they said they weren't receiving anything. 53% of that group had student loan recipients or grant recipients, like Pell Grants, and 60% had some kind of government benefit, interest deduction, or benefits on their mortgage, their home mortgages. So lots of times we think that we are not benefits of government programs. It's just that we don't know what the programs are. All right, and so our final question for this chapter: who are we? We are an aging nation. So we're made up of a large portion of our population are baby boomers that are growing older, and more are receiving Social Security and Medicare. So that kind of gives you an idea of why those programs are so strong and big and on and in a position where they politicians have a hard time discussing cutting them or even revising them because a large proportion of our society, and like I said in our introductory video, uh, the people 55 and over tend to vote way more than the younger generation. So politicians don't want to cut their main source of income, um, and take the chance of not being reelected since they're the ones that get out and vote. And then we have the millennial and Generation Z. Studies show that millennials are, listen carefully, more responsible, harder working, more law abiding, volunteer more, and give more to charity than their previous generation. I know millennials get a bad rap, so I like to put this throughout my lectures just to make sure that we all are aware that millennials actually are better than my generation in those regards. So if we look at other countries and the aging population, I did my studies on aging populations in Japan, and Japan is going to see the most severe increase of 85 years and older and 65 years and older. This means that there's a bigger strain because you have more people in collecting pensions and collecting their version of Social Security. The United States is not quite as bad as Japan, but we still have a large 65 to 85 population. And this is basically because people are living longer lives, and of course, the baby boomers, the younger generation are having less children, so we're seeing more population in the older generation. This kind of gives you a better idea. So here are the baby boomers coming up here, and they're all going to be retiring. And then, of course, if you compare the 1990s to the later, I think this might be 2050, a lot less children being born, so we have a larger population that will need assistance. And Social Security comes from the working class. So if the working class has gotten smaller, but they're pulling out their benefits at a higher rate here for a longer period of time, we will see some severe challenges in the Social Security system. We'll talk about that also later. And then I like to show this chart. It's not an age, but this is by race. This just shows the percentage of Asian, Hispanic, Black, and whites in America projection through 2060. Okay, so our objectives, we talked about the 7 key American ideas. One of your discussion questions will be to pick one of those ideas and write about it. Please follow the instruction on your discussion questions. It's due by the end of this week. Also, the arguments, we talked about the arguments surrounding them. And then there will also be a second discussion question on the elevator analogy. So you can, after you've read both of the chapters, you should be able to pick an issue and answer all the questions there. It's basically your opinion. And then lastly, there's another crash course. Let's see, I think it's this one here, PBS. Please review that. That'll help the ideas that we just discussed sink in. And then this will happen at the end of each lecture. I will give you some hints of what to study for the exam. The following topics will be on the exam: American exceptionalism. So make sure you read that part in your book. The 7 key American ideas: negative and positive liberty, direct democracy initiatives, referendums. We didn't talk about recalls yet, but we will before your exam. And sunshine laws. Also the definition of politics, and then you should be aware of the 4 largest spending programs. Okay, so let's see, sorry, let me go back to here. Uh, that's it for today. Thank you for listening and see you next lecture.